Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for taking a little time on your evening. Maybe you have a little dinner, maybe you have a little cocktail, maybe you're sitting around in your jammies, and that's wonderful. We are excited to have you with us for tonight's conversation. This is going to be one to remember. I am really looking forward to tonight. So to get us started, I'm Meredith Badler. I'm the Deputy Director of the Cbca, Colorado Business Committee for the Arts. And we are excited to be co-presenting tonight's webinar with our dear friends at the Art Students League of Denver, Redline Contemporary Arts Center, and the Clifford Still Museum. If you are representing one of those organizations tonight, and you have your camera on, give a little wave, give a little dance so we can know who you are, and thank you. This Advancing Creatives series has gone by many names and has evolved over the years, but it has always been a collaboration amongst those three core organizations I mentioned as a way to provide community and education for our creative professionals and artists in the Denver metro area and in Colorado. They've been putting together these workshops previously in person at their beautiful venues and facilities for the past several years. And Cbca is excited to be a programming partner, sort of the hub in the wheel, helping to coordinate these events. Tonight's conversation we have titled Checking In and Looking Forward. That's a pretty broad name, and this could be a pretty far-reaching conversation. 2020 has been, to use the cliche words, an unprecedented year, particularly for the arts and culture sector. It is undeniable that this pandemic and everything else that it has opened up about our society has really had a devastating and interesting and powerful impact on our arts sector. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. We have 4 amazing panelists that represent several different arts organizations in the area and a great moderator for that conversation. Before I turn it over to them, just a few Zoom housekeeping items. We are recording this conversation. So if you're watching this later on YouTube, maybe you're also eating some dinner in your jammies. I don't know, but that's great. Hello to you if you're watching this later as a recording. I want to make sure everyone who's participating with us live on Zoom finds your little chat feature. And to practice using your chat feature, please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, what you do, why you logged on tonight's conversation. That's good practice, because that's a great way that we'll be getting your questions and comments and reactions throughout tonight's webinar is through that chat feature. So go ahead, find it, introduce yourself, and engage in that way. We do have quite a big group with us tonight as we get to sort of towards the end and engage in our Q&A. We do have the ability to let people unmute themselves and have that conversation, but it can be easier for this sort of facilitation to use the chat for that. So you are muted when you joined. We ask that you stay muted for at least most of this conversation, just to avoid any background noise. You're welcome to keep your camera on or off. It's up to you. You can flip around in your speaker view versus gallery view. We have our panelists pinned or spotlighted, whatever the correct phrase is. So you'll be able to see them front and center when we get to our panel. So feel free to play around with that. There's also a nifty video setting called Hide Non-Video Participants. So anyone who has their camera off, they'll sort of be off from your screen. And we do have closed captioning. You will see that also on the bottom of your little Zoom thing. I always forget if it says subtitles or closed captioning. It's something obvious. So if that's helpful for you, if you want to follow along that way, we are delighted at Cbca to offer closed captioning. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my little welcome screen there. All right, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator and our panelists tonight. We have 4 panelists with us, Tia Elisa Anthony, Stefan Brackett, Lares Feliciano, Ryan Fu, and our conversation will be moderated by Chrissy Deal. And I'm gonna turn it over to her to lead us through the rest of tonight's conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you to Cbca, all of the co-hosts, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. I've been living on Zoom, as a lot of us have, but I haven't had a large group discussion opportunity in a long time. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and enjoying the introductions and looking at the names as I'm kind of scrolling through. So we have a lot to talk about and we want to talk with you as well. So I want to get started, but I'll start with a land acknowledgement, which I feel is important to do even given the fact that we are all in our own respective places, and I'm not sure if there are folks that are not in the Denver metro area. So I have something written down, so I'll go ahead and read that. I wanted to take a moment to speak to the indigenous land on which we all reside. We humbly and respectfully acknowledge that even in a digital space, our lives and work take place on the traditional, ancestral, and occupied homelands of multiple indigenous nations and people. I joined tonight personally from Denver and draw from the Denver City Council's acknowledgement, which was crafted in close consultation with Indigenous leaders on the Denver American Indian Commission. So that acknowledgement reads as follows. We honor and acknowledge that the land on which we reside is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous people. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of oppression and inequities and recognize the current and future contributions of Indigenous communities in Denver. So I want to introduce myself briefly. I'm Chrissy Deal, and I am new to the Bonfi-Stanton Foundation only for about 6 weeks or so. I am the director of the Livingston Fellowship Program and also direct our arts and social change grant making. So settling into that role, and was thrilled to get the invitation to moderate tonight's conversation. I wanted to invite our panelists to also introduce themselves, and that introduction could include, of course, your name, your affiliations, in whatever way you want to share those, where you're calling from, and that could mean state of mind, or like I'm in my basement, which I am in my basement in the north side, and then just briefly, something that is feeding your soul. So wanting to kind of frame this this conversation from a place of gratitude right now. So I'm just going to move to, I guess, my right, but wherever the squares appear here on the screen. And Stefan, you're the one that's next to me, so I'll go with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chrissy. I am Stefan Malloy Brackett. My performer name is Brer Rabbit. I'm in the band Flobots. I am coming from my basement in Northeast Park Hill, which is actually the neighborhood I grew up in as a kid. Um, I feel blessed to be here because I for the longest time I'd be priced out of the place where I grew up, but through a whole lot of luck, we were able to find a place that actually worked out for us. Yes, and like what's feeding my soul? Well, one thing that's feeding me are conversations like this. And I'm really excited that there are people coming together and having conversations out of the necessity of the moment. Because in this moment, there are As much as there is need, then there must be innovation. So I'm really excited to be talking with people about the innovation, because that innovation is required for there to be a tomorrow that we can all stand and face and be proud of. And do I pass it to somebody, or are you doing it, Chrissy? Okay, let me see. I'm going to pass it to the person who's on my left, which is Lares.
Hello, hello, everyone. My name is Lattice Feliciano, and I am an interdisciplinary artist, educator, and I am the new art grants manager at Redline Contemporary Art Center. So similar to Christy, I'm new in my role and just really enjoying all the folks that I'm meeting and all the things that I'm learning as I step into that role. Let's see, where am I calling from? I'm calling from my kitchen corner slash studio slash work from home office space. So this is where I've been kind of hunkered down during this pandemic here in Denver, kind of in the Glendale area. And what is feeding my soul? Gosh, you know, there's so many things, like really cheesy Christmas lights and plush, just lots and lots of plush. But you know, I will be really honest that the thing that I just find very grounding lately is TikTok. I love TikTok, and I'm really enjoying just diving into the TikTok sphere. So if anyone wants to talk TikTok, I'm your girl. Oh, and I will pass it on to Tia. Tia.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Lattice. My name is Tia Elisa Anthony. I am an interdisciplinary artist and curator, founder of Mahogany View, artist residency, online virtual gallery, thriving on the Brown and Healthy Network. I'm also the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, a recent alumni of Redline. As well as I am on the working DEIA committee for the Clifford Still Museum. Where am I calling from? I am calling from Aurora. That's how I say it, because I was born in the Colorado Springs, and military kid, I traveled around frequently until mid-30s and moved back to Denver. So I'm happy to be here. What's feeding my soul right now is tea, just different kinds of teas, and my own personal teacup mug situation that I can carry wherever I want, as well as conversations, you know, that are genuine, they're not forced, and this group. And I appreciate everyone for being here. I'll pass it to Ryan.
Hey there, everybody. Love you too. Bye-bye. I am Ryan Fu. I'm Director of Operations over at the Black Actors Guild. I'm an independent event producer, which means I've thrown parties and large gatherings of folks have generally made my living, which has been very fun these last 8-9 months. I'm also a fabricator. I make stuff that I take to festivals like Burning Man. Have a team of people that I work with, like Steven Sampson in re-engineering. And I am a teaching artist as well. I am a theater artist and director. So I am currently calling from 5 Points. This is my wife's ancestral home. I was hoping to turn the camera on and give you all a cute shot of my baby, because that's going to be my answer to the next question. But right now I'm in 5 Points, you know, Curtis Park. We're right off of 28th and Champa, across just a couple blocks down from the old Crossroads Theater, who still has their sign up, but is no longer a theater. Originally started by Kurt Lewis. Mad love to the man and the legacy, which is where Black Actors Guild got its start, at the Crossroads Theater. So have lived here for a while. Love the space. Love the home. And a lot of respect to the ancestral lands here. What's giving me life is the baby. It's too late to turn him around. He was eating pizza. It was super cute. He had cheese all over his face. But then my wife tried to start cleaning up his face, and he got very mad about that, because, you know, it's leftovers. He's saving them for later. So he's away and off. But it's the baby. It's the family. How could you not? How could that not be what gives me life right now? So that's it. That's me.
Perfect. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. And I love to imagine where you're situated, geographically. So thank you for checking in that way. So let's get started because the clock is ticking, and we got to talk. So to start out, as Meredith mentioned, the description, there's a lot to unpack there, and there's a lot, and we've done a little bit of that in preparation for our conversation tonight. And I wanted to begin with a question specifically about the mentioning of a collective vision for the coming year and beyond. So let's move beyond 2020, right, everybody? Yes. And so with that question and that concept of a collective vision, I'm really eager to hear who you would consider to be a part of that collective. Who in your community or communities are you currently partnering with or seeking to partner with in reimagining what is to come in those future years as an artist specifically, and then even thinking more broadly to the broader cultural sector. So I think that we'll get started with Gladys.
Right on. Thank you, Chrissy. Thanks for putting together such thoughtful and awesome questions. They've been bouncing around in my brain ever since you sent them to us. So this is a great question. Thinking about our collective vision moving forward is something that is constantly on my mind. I've thought a lot about 2020, and I know I'm not the only person to have this notion that 2020 is a portal, and it is a portal for us to move into a new and better world. And that is up to us to decide what that is. And so who is part of that? I firmly believe that anytime you are making decisions that affect other people, those people need to be at the table. Those people need to have a say. And so as we're envisioning this new future, as we're moving through this portal together, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and there's a lot of people who need to be at the table. So it can be kind of overwhelming, right? Like, how do we do this? There have been many days where I'm like, I'm just gonna hide under my weighted blanket because I can't handle all of this. But luckily, for all of us, luckily, there are so many people on the ground doing incredible work. And so in my role in arts and society, I am really fortunate to see folks across the state who are just on the ground hustling despite everything that's happening, prioritizing their communities, prioritizing collectiveness, prioritizing connectedness. And so it's just really, really inspiring. So when I think of who those people are, I say, look to the communities right around you, look to the folks who are on the ground, who are organizing in your communities. And if you aren't sure who they are, like, get on social media, get on the internet, like they're out there, they're on this call, they're in this, they're in the chat right here. And then personally, as an artist, I have been really looking to Black and Indigenous creators, artists, activists, and community organizers to be my guidepost in kind of envisioning what this world is going to look like moving forward. To me, that is crucial. So I recently listened to an incredible podcast, the Red Nation podcast. I highly recommend. They did an episode on the National Day of Remembrance, formerly known as Thanksgiving. And they talked about the idea of not even wanting there to be a table. Let's get rid of this table. When we talk about there needs to be seats at the table, why do we need a table? So I'll end my rant there, but I'm just so increasingly inspired by all of the folks around me, including the folks on this panel.
Thank you. I love your comments in that for me, it sort of prompts some major undoing, right? Some like significant undoing, and just sort of giving us a glimpse into sort of how that's all kind of coming together for you in your professional role, through your practice, through your networks, and how you're expanding that. So Stefan, what do you What are you thinking about in terms of your collective vision and your community?
Well, I think most of it's been said. I think Lattice just like killed it, and I'm thankful for it. And I'll just say like just like in adding to it, I feel like COVID has really highlighted uh, the disruption that happens with industry, right? Like that has just been for all of us, for most of us who are artists in many different ways. Like it has been disrupted. I think just for artists, period, just like for many things. But in the midst of it, we also get to interrupt um, the culture of arts being market facing. Um, so in this, like, like market consumer, like when we're talking about like that actual relationship of community that Lattice was talking about, market consumer, that's really restricting, right? And I'm not saying like it's an evil thing, but like that's been the metric of success for most of us in the arts is like how like moving units, clicks, likes, profit, all of these things. But when that's interrupted, it also does open up other channels to kind of look at what are other more dialogues, because market consumer is minimalist as far as the conversation. But like if we start looking at some of the ways that arts have been practiced for millennia in many different cultures, you start seeing like art as resource, art as dialogue, art as the main connective tissue for a community. And I think particularly in this time when there's been so much energy and actual money spent to divide us, one of the answers is the old one. The arts are one of the things that can help bring us together. And while like so many times what ends up happening is that the creative sector is then asked to be creative in like how to make something from nothing and like with no kind of funding. But I also do think that if we are able to show up and show like some of the good that our stuff does, then it's going to make an easier argument down the line when things reopen. Because it's like, well, what was there for me when everything was burning down? It's like, oh, these community concerts. And then also like one of the things I feel like is one of the toughest things is that good is small, it's quiet. When stuff is working well, it's small, quiet, but it's abundant. So I think we also have to try to find other ways beyond marketing and advertising, because marketing and advertising once again works only in the silo of profit. So like how do we find ways once again to kind of get the word out? Like all these people on these calls, like everybody here is like doing such incredible work. So how do we hold all of our candles up in the right way that it blasts away the darkness? I don't have the answers for that, but I do know that that's a necessity in this time and in this moment. And also, I'm so bad about talking about myself. I'm sure there's some folks in the call who are like, Stefan, you didn't say what you do. Like, yes, I've been in Flobots, but that's like the smallest of things I've done. Co-founder of Youth on Record, and right now I'm currently the Colorado statewide music ambassador. So I'm saying that legitimately I'm trying to get things together so that like this spring we're figuring out ways to create variances in the code so that like our block parties can now become like showcases for different artists. And I'm trying to work on making that happen, making it safe. But like, how do we fill the city with music? And then like, we do it because we need it in COVID. And then once we've done it, we do it because we need it because we're human beings from here on out. So like Denver and then maybe the rest of the state then just becomes a city where in the spring and summer, the streets are filled with music. That's the kind of stuff that I want to see. And that's the kind of collective that I think that we all deserve.
Absolutely. So there's this sense that I get as I hear both you and Lettuce kind of talk about like how pregnant this time is for possibility and the preparation that is sort of underway for when like the gates open, right? And we can be together and we can have these events and we can perform and so I think about you know um we're talking about a new path, right? And that and what forging that new path means for you and for the communities that you're a part of. So I want to ask a related question, and this is just some thoughts that came to mind as I was kind of again looking at the description for tonight's conversation. So many artists, arts administrators, policymakers, funders are in agreement about this time being an opportunity to do that, to develop that new pathway, right, and that new way forward. Many, although not everyone, recognizes that the ways our sector has historically operated has been to the benefit of some and exclusion and detriment of others. Part of the reason why I think we have as many people as we do joining us tonight is to also join in that reimagining of what that new normal is, and leaving behind the things that that can and should be left behind. So several months now, 8+ months into the pandemic and the economic crisis and our racial reckoning, the description, the word used in the description was hope. And so the question specifically for Tia and Ryan to respond to is, does that effectively represent your mindset right now and your outlook at this particular point in time? If that isn't the word, then what sentiment do you hold, and how is that driving or impacting your work?
So I'd like to start with answering that. For me, hope does not fit for me. I believe that, excuse me, we're at a point, at a place that we can no longer be complicit. We can no longer, that's the phrase that sticks with me the most. We can no longer be complicit or afraid to speak up or to join trainings, workshops, conversations, dialogues that make us uncomfortable. I think that is where we begin. That is what actually helps me consider moving forward. No longer operating in what was considered normal. I don't want to go back to a normal. I don't want to go back to a new normal. I want us to be able to fluctuate and make decisions and changes and choices as we do within life, and not saying it to be unruly and anarchist and, outside of constructs. I mean, Ryan, I'm with you if you're ready, but I think that, we can no longer be complicit. And I know that Ryan has a lot to say about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated because, and nuanced, right? As everything is, because I think so many people are still grieving the sort of like a loss of their normalcy. And I don't mean to say this in a way that is meant to be aggressive or attacking in any way, but the folks who are grieving the normalcy, most of the folks who are grieving the normalcy, meant that there was some kind of like they were comfortable enough or living a privileged enough life, however it is you want to take that, all the intersectional forms of privilege that exist. You're all woke folks, I'm sure. Uh, that the normal is something that's okay for you, like there's something referred to as like the brunch crowd, which is the idea that like, as soon as Donald Trump gets out of office or as soon as XYZ changes, like we can go back to brunch and everything's going to be fine. But that just shows that there's sort of like not the stake, there's not the vest from that community to make any substantial change because they don't see the need for change. And I want to hold some space too that like that's reasonable from their point of view. And part of what I think is being presented, and I think the phrase you used was racial reckoning, which is fair. You could also call it a historical reckoning. You could also call it just the truth, like a statistical reckoning with what's happening, which is that the normal that a lot of people know is not a normal a lot of folks want to go back to, because it's a world where they feel oppressed and stolen from and unheard and unseen. And those of us who do have the privilege to, achieve some kind of normal, even in today's world, have to recognize that like we have a kind of duty to listen to those folks and see what's going on and try and just listen. You don't even have to do anything. Just listen and see what's happening. To sort of go back to the origin of the question about hope. Whenever someone says hope now, I can't help but think of the like Obama campaign, right? Like they branded hope so darn well. And for a lot of people, like, Barack Obama or, like Kamala Harris, they represent, a new series of representation for folks who've never been represented in those ways. But there are some deeper questions that I have about the sort of like shallow nature of hope. I'm going to present something here that's a little bit Buddhist, which is that in Buddhist teachings, it's considered that hope and fear, I think the exact quote is something like made from the same material, born of the same cloth, which is this like sort of assumption that the future is going to be a certain kind of way, right? Hope is like, oh, the future is going to be great. And fear is, oh no, the future. But either way, they're very future oriented. They live in these ideological worlds that don't exist. And so for me, as much as I want people to be hopeful, and as much as I want us to take, like I have a lot of inspiration, maybe is a better word, to take from our communities, right? Like I know lots of communities that as soon as the pandemic hit, they were giving food away and taking care of each other and going door to door and saying, what do you need? You know, lots of, so all of a sudden there was this urge for people to take care of each other. And I love that. And that does give me a lot of inspiration. But the reason I'm weary of using the word hope is that it negates the tumultuous and nuanced nature of the present, of like recognizing what's happening right now and focusing too much on what could be. Yes, lots of things can be. I am inspired for what they can be, but we got to reckon with what's happening now. And that's going to inform how we move in the direction toward the future. And I know this is nuanced and kind of weird and spiritual, but if we're too focused on like where we're going and like this ideological version of where we're going, it doesn't, we're not actually going to get there, because like us going there is a now thing, right? Like the step, you don't get to take you don't teleport to the future. You have to like take step by step now. And if someone's missing a foot, or if there's a pothole in the road, or if the road doesn't exist, or if you need a machete to cut down the vines, those are all metaphors, then the now becomes a lot more important than the future. And so for me, that's why I'm weary of the word hope. And so I would use the word inspired. I am very inspired. And I hope a lot of other people are too. Ha! That's it.
Anyone else want to chime in at all? Gladys?
Yeah, I would. Thank you, Tia and Ryan, for those thoughts. I'm inspired. I gotta say the word that keeps coming to mind for me as I'm thinking about moving forward and what's ahead is the word healing. And in order to heal, you have to acknowledge that there has been pain and that there has been loss. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Tia and Ryan said. I think hope is a nice concept, but there's some real mucky stuff that we have to deal with to be able to move forward, and it requires being in the present in a way that hope maybe doesn't allow.
Stefan, anything to add? No.
I think a liberation, self-liberation, independent thought. I think, all those words come to mind as action, as movement, as, not, being stagnant. And when I go back to fear, I always go back to fear when it comes to, making choices, making decisions, being able to take that step. And I understand that's, I agree with you, Lattice. It is uncomfortable, but there is a lot of stuff that has surfaced. So, I think hope puts a Band-Aid, not even a Band-Aid. I think hope kind of, brushes over the topics and what we really need to discuss. So thanks.
I just want to respond to Stuart's comment really fast, which was just that he said that hope is what prevents people from ending their life sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. Like that, I don't think we're all like shedding on the concept of hope ideologically, right? Like it's important to be hopeful. It's just like the context that like the hope as a concept is used, kind of like weaponized against movements in particular. And maybe weaponized, I think it's the right word. It's let's use the word anesthesia. It can be a kind of anesthesia for numbing the pain. And is anesthesia itself bad? Like, depends on the context, right? Are you going into surgery and you need to be still while they're, cutting your heart open? Then that's probably pretty important, but to what end and how much like dosage of this anesthesia are we receiving, and is it useful for what we're, so again, some nuance here.
Like, for example, I've been hoping for another stimulus check.
That's so perfect. So for me, as I'm listening to your comments and sort of reflecting personally, I think that the jump that I sense from, so where we are and the experiences that we're having and the connections that we're making distantly, and that concept of hope, like that's a in my view, that's a chasm, that's a divide. And I think that part of this, like the reason that we're having this conversation is like, what are the links, what are the connections to that, right? If that or if it's not hope, it's inspiration, it's liberation, it's those things that you articulated that that you have come to sort of see and realize in new and important and impactful ways as artists, right? And so I think that thinking about the many months that we've been reflecting and been assessing and reassessing and sort of strategizing, because I think we all have been doing that, sometimes collectively in a forum like this, or in our work, or our family units, or whatever that might look like. But as artists, I imagine as well. So there are these things that have been lifted up and made very clear, and they're in centering, perhaps, right, and giving you focus. At the same time, I wonder, what are the things that you have had to let go of at the same time, right? Knowing that we have limited capacity at any given moment. We are, it feels like we're in constant crisis, with news coming at us, and just the tumultuous times that we're living in. And so if there are things that in this process of discovery through life, as an artist, what are some of those things that you have let go of to allow for development in some new and important way for you creatively, personally? And I'm not sure who's going to take this first.
I'll start.
Yeah.
I think that I've gained, actually, in this one, I've gained self-importance, honoring my self-care and space in the fact that I'm not a machine, or I'm not AI, or I'm not, I guess, I'm just not, I'm not a starving artist. I'm not, I'm also not happy with my place in like the consumer pool, or the, the capitalistic pool there. I've taken a step back with my work, thinking more along the lines of mentorship, for other artists, for international, national, friends and family, for collectives. I've let go of this idea of that I am the machine, that I am, having to produce series after series. I have to produce in this time of chaos. I've begun to allow myself to grieve. There's so much loss that has happened. I don't think that that's being represented in, the conversations that we're having, like, personally. So I think my outlook has changed, and the work that I'm doing continues, but it just looks differently what the material and the medium is.
Thank you. Stefan.
I'm in total agreement with what Tia said. The grieving portion, I mean, it's not a surprise that just gets minimized in our culture that's so afraid of death. And there's so much death that's going on. But also, I just really have to resonate with something that Emily Roan was saying in the comments about giving your power away, and it just made me realize that one of the things I'm trying to let go of are all the culturally acceptable ways that my culture has normalized giving away my power. To be specific, like the hypervigilance of the moment of like living in a time where we're supposed to be polarized, and like polarization is most effectively enacted through fear. Um, I've when I say that, I've got to let go of that, because I wouldn't be here if my parents were paralyzed by that same threat, or if my grandparents or great grandparents had been paralyzed by a much larger, very present gravitational pull of like the threat of being in the South during Jim Crow. Um, so like there's also like this yes, this moment is heavy, but I want to let go of like being scared and giving away my power in the way that like I'm supposed to in this. Like I'm supposed to give that away and then just consume instead. So I'm trying to kind of let go of that. And also in that, I think it's changing the way that I'm making art now, which feels like a beautiful gift in this moment. Um, like if I'm using my art in one way to kind of like speak through and past the things that are in my context, and then perhaps give myself some medicine for it, and then maybe if I'm in communication with my community and other folks, I might be able to do the same thing with it. Like this is an alchemical process that we can all participate in. So yeah, I'm trying to like kind of let go of the programming.
Ryan or Lattice, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing these folks, and riding on the same train. I have been just letting go of pretending like I'm not struggling with depression and grief, because I am. I struggle with it every day, and I was struggling with it before the pandemic. So OG over here, and it's, it is exhausting to pretend like everything's fine. It's not fine. It's messed up. Things are really messed up. And a lot of us have experienced a lot of loss just this year. So, I'm echoing what my colleagues here have already said, that grief and loss are front and center. And for me, I'm letting go of pretending like that's not the case.
Yeah, I'll add that it's so hard to talk after these three very wonderful panelists who say such good things. The thing that came to mind for me is letting go of like the need to be an expert or to have like an opinion about things. We live in this, Stefan talked about these like polarizing times. I'm going to say a couple of words that may trigger you. Like people ask me sometimes, as kind of like a hippy dippy fellow that doesn't trust the government, like, are you going to take a vaccine? Like, what do you feel about vaccines? I'm like, well, I don't really know. And I'm starting to come more and more into a place of power. Be like, look, bro, you're going to have to try and figure it out for yourself, because I'm just doing what I can do. Like I know I can tell you what I think, like this is my opinion. And finding it really refreshing to spend time with people who don't have like the dogma of righteousness, that like they know the answer. And seeing how many people spend their time, during COVID, on this or that conspiracy theory, who they're voting for, whether or not they're vaccinating or whatever. Oh, look at that beautiful cat. Spending their time, arguing with each other because they're just so sure they're right. Or parading in this way that's just so righteous. And I, even saying that, I'm like weary of like being like, oh look, don't trust me as an expert in that sense, like be righteous if you want. But I just think there's so much freedom in that. And there's been a lot of talk in the chat about like giving up our power, and something that was mentioned there. And it's funny because I just want to offer the other side of the coin, which is sometimes it's fine to give up your power. It's like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine with it. I don't need power. You can have you can have it. It looks like a lot. So just this sense of saying, I don't need to have an opinion about this, or I don't have to argue with other people about what my opinions are, because there's been so much of that. And am really happy to live in a place that doesn't bring that front and center.
Thank you all. So I don't want to trivialize this question, but in terms of things that I'm letting go, so it's 6:45. There's more I want to talk about, but I don't want to care about the clock is what I want to let go. But also I'm asking my husband to fix my smoke alarm, which is chirping.
Oh.
So I just texted him, and yeah, so it was
We can't hear it, just so you know.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was like, uh-oh.
Weird.
So yeah, anyway, so I don't want to care about time as much, especially when we have access to to you all, but I also want to be respectful of folks' time. So I do want to ask one more question. I know that we had hoped to open it up and have some Q&A as well. So I'm going to check in with the panelists and with Meredith, who's like there, but like behind the scenes. Is it okay to keep going with the questions, or what do you want to do? Keep going? Okay, cool. We got the one. So so the description also spoke to systems, right? Gaps in the systems. And that part of the description really got the wheels turning in my head, because I thought, which ones are you talking about, right? Like, how do you where do you even start, right? And so I would love to hear Ryan, to begin, your thoughts about you know, what systems are most relevant to you or come to mind for you when thinking about that, and how you're currently exploring your role in those systems, and how else you sort of view yourself to be a part of those systems, and also drawing, you know, folks in your community into some of that work. So if you want to go ahead and jump in on that one.
Yeah, sure. That's a lot. But but I will say this, that there are large systems and obvious gaps that I feel like I personally don't need to address. You know, like, I don't feel like the gap between, you know, super alt-right neo-Nazis and, you know, working class African-American folks, I don't feel like that's a gap I need to address right now. I think that my work personally is in the more like sort of closer together, or maybe gaps which in illusion might appear to be a little closer than they are. The ones that I think of are like, and I think other folks might be able to speak to like the nonprofit gaps that exist between like communities and nonprofits. For me, the first one that comes to mind is the gap of modern day neoliberalism and the divergent left that is existing, starting to really emerge, specifically among young people. I'm gonna take a guess. I think I'm one of the younger people here in this room, but my generation, the millennial generation and Gen Z, is pretty left and significantly farther left of the Democratic Party as a whole, as an institution, it certainly seems. And my generation's done with it. We're tired of it. We don't give a fuck. You know, sorry to curse, but like we're done. We don't care anymore. We don't care about political correctness in like this forum that requires that, you know, we're going to use the system to get what we want done. And you can see that in a variety of ways. And I'll just, you know, but generally it's this, to use the word neoliberal again, which just means like, I heard someone describe it the other day as like the people who say they're socially liberal but fiscally conservative. You know, it just means that they're people who believe in the ideals of liberalism, but just love them some good old fashioned capitalism. And that gap between the leaders in the Democratic Party and leaders in our communities, leaders in the top of nonprofit organizations, the gap between those people and the people who need help on the ground, the artists, the creatives, the community organizers, the people who run food banks, the people who grow food, who run composting collectives, the gap between those people is significant. And the significance of that gap is that the folks on the ground aren't measuring the success with the metrics that a lot of the folks who run nonprofits are measuring it. And that's important because the folks on the ground don't, like, they're not vying for money or for grant. They don't have to prove their worth in the same way. And I'm not saying they're not useful, but to me, that's a really important gap. And I think I just want to speak to it because I think a lot of the people in this room and a lot of the arts and culture folks who live in this, nonprofit bubble, I just want you to take a second to go and check in with your more radical, for lack of a better word, um, folks on the street. And I want you to know that we love you and we appreciate your support, and like, money is nice, but we have to recognize at this point that part of, and I just speak for myself, this is just my opinion, I'm not an expert, don't trust me in any form of righteousness. It's my opinion that part of the Democratic Party's job at this point is to slow down progressive movements. And it's really sad to say. It's really sad to say that that's my opinion, and that that's what most young people's opinion on the left is. It's like, man, the Democratic Party is in our way. What is going on? And I could get into why I think that's the case. It's pretty well documented, but there's no doubt that a lot of liberals and liberal leaning folks and institutions have failed to capture the needs of young people and the poor and the working class. I mean, I'll call out Mayor Hancock. He probably won't like that, but I serve on his Arts and Commission panel, and a question about homelessness came up the other day, and he totally just neglected to respond. But you can't, espouse progressive values and then burn homeless people's stuff, the unhoused people's stuff. That's ridiculous. You can't drag them around in the street. You can't fund a police department that beats their ass. That's ridiculous. You're just like, the word hypocrisy doesn't capture what's happening. It's actually delusion. It's this, and so that's the gap I want to address. I know that's hard to hear, and if you're someone to whom, like, I say these things and it makes you feel like, oh, like, that's okay, and like the world is changing, and part of like this whole movement, this racial reckoning, as it was referred to before, this is something we need to address, because yes, racists are bad. Like, well done. We would prefer not to have those people, but there are some more subtle forms of oppression that might be more important to deal with. And that's what I want to refer to. And I just want to say, like, that we've just got too many leaders in positions of power, in my opinion, and in young people's opinions, who speak the speak. Oh no. Oh no, did it take me out? Sorry, I got removed. Okay, I'm here. I'm back. Somebody called me. There's got too many leaders in positions of power who speak the speak but don't walk the walk. And they could do it. If Mayor Hancock wants to find money for homeless people, he could sell some buildings. There are plenty of publicly owned properties and publicly owned assets. He could sell it. He's got the power. Sell them, and there's the money, right? Or tax it, or whatever. There's a million different ways you could do it. He's choosing not to. And I'm beyond, and my generation's beyond the talk. We're ready to see the action. So that's the gap I want to address.
Thank you, Ryan. And Lattice, you were gonna also add, I think, from that nonprofit industrial complex perspective now.
Yes, Ryan, you're a radical after my own heart. I just love you. I have been working in the nonprofit sector for several years, and I'm the one in the room who is like, nonprofit industrial complex, like, this is a thing. We need to talk about it. And it's beautiful, because when I kind of began my career working in nonprofits across, across the sectors, but specifically in arts, and bringing that up in board meetings in other settings has become easier and easier over the years. And I would say that it's not impossible for nonprofits to exist in this system and mess it up, quite frankly, mess it up in good, beautiful ways. And so, I say, look to the organizations and the institutions that are down to work with folks like Ryan, folks like me, folks who, are willing to question and challenge things, because those organizations are artist centric. those organizations understand what needs to be done, and they understand the role that they play in this larger system. And I actually think that we're really lucky here in Denver. We've got a whole slew of organizations that are down to clown, including the folks who put on this event tonight. So, you know, I will say we are fortunate to have some really awesome advocates in this city in particular. So look to them. And yeah, I'm with you though, Ryan. I'm with you. We have a lot of dismantling to do, and a lot of uncomfortable conversations to have, and a lot of folks are doing that work. And so look to them. I'm also really, I've been thinking about this question so much, Chrissy, since our conversation on Friday. And I keep thinking about this quote from Solange Knowles. It was in 2017, I think, on Twitter. And she said, create your own communities, build your own institutions, give your friends awards, award yourself, and be the gold you want to hold, my G's. And that is a mantra that I hold dear to my heart. And I think, you know, while we are supporting and engaging with those nonprofits and those organizations that are doing the work and down to clown, like I said, we should also be building our own stuff outside of those systems, outside of the 501c3 system, outside of the government. Like, we should be building our own systems, because guess what? None of this stuff was here on day one, right? Like, all of this stuff was manifested by systems like capitalism, colonialism, etc. So we have to decolonize to be able to really break free from these things, and that includes building our own systems and our own institutions. Thank you, Solange Knowles.
For that and many other things, right? So, well, thank you. I am seeing some questions in the chat, and so do you want to take a few minutes? I know we're a few minutes from 7, but so we have some time. We got time, even though I don't care about that. So there was a question about best practices. So what are some best practices to integrate yourself more into artistic communities and helping other artists? And anybody who has thoughts, could please chime in.
Just really quickly, I want to say support artists that are at the front of movements.
And I would say when you're supporting these communities, artists, people, that you're genuine and you have some kind of knowledge that supports your desire. And if, you know, and not necessarily asking that person, do the work, do the background, the research, and actually be involved with the communities that you're attempting to support. And I mean, I realize everyone here on this call is a part of the community, but if someone else asks you, tell them to be genuine.
I want to keep going with this question and by asking this of all of us, because I think also what's behind this question is, how do you genuinely reach out to a community that you're not already in communication with? And I hear this question so many times in so many spaces. So I'd also be curious as to what all of y'all's answers would be, like, just genuinely, because this question is so prevalent.
So for me, I've been in Denver now for 10 years. And when I arrived in Denver, I was not necessarily welcomed with open arms. So I attempt to open my arms more frequently and just allow myself to be open and, connect in that way. Because I feel like there are a lot of institutions that are frenemies. I feel that there could be some, what Ryan said, some reckoning and realization that, in order for us to actually be productive in connecting, that we're going to have to be, those larger institutions also have to be a part of those conversations. I think that picking and choosing and biting and fighting and I choose that vernacular this evening because it's real.
Yeah, this is all really important, important conversation. You know, I think when it comes to reaching out to groups that you're not a part of, or maybe that are outside of your initial kind of bubble or comfort zone, I think the first thing is to ask why. Why am I doing this? Why do I need to do this? Do I need to do this? Are people doing the work that I am trying to do already? That I can just throw some Venmo cash at and just, you know, retweet, post, etc. That's first. And then, you know, and if your answers are such that, yeah, you gotta keep going and continue to pursue this, then I'm telling you, the internet, if the internet was not already the place to be, it is the place to be in 2020. And there are so many brilliant artists, creators on Instagram, TikTok. I told y'all I love TikTok. Tons of other, you know, YouTube, all of them who are making beautiful, creative, brilliant things, sharing. I mean, every day I'm like blown away by the things that I learn just by scrolling through TikTok. So take the time to see who is out there, who is doing the work, and think about how you can support it. I would say start from there.
Yep, I'm just going to double down on that. Do that. There are, like, if you're someone who works in nonprofit and you're like, oh, we got a grant to go help this community, like, don't go to that community at large and try and support them in the way that like a leader would. Go and find the leaders of that community and sit down with them and say, hey, we've got this thing to offer. Like, how can what do you need, and is this of service to you? And then move from there, because the really crazy thing is that, you know, I'm all about build new systems, but like new systems have no money and have very few resources. And if you want to be someone, and if you don't, that's fine, like, do you. But if you want to be someone in the nonprofit industry, in the philanthropic world that supports community in that way, then don't reinvent the wheel. Go to the people that have been doing it for nothing forever and doing great work, and fund them. Go give them love. Go work it out. You can find the language. You're all linguists who could write grants and make them do whatever you want. Like, you can shape your program around the community needs. You're clever enough.
Don't get me started on grant writing and relationships with funders. Okay, that's a different conversation, and I should probably watch what I'm saying because I've only had my job for 6 weeks. So, there's we're at time. It is 7:02. So I'm like being sort of reluctant. Like, nobody's doing this. I'm doing it to myself. Like, I think we should probably close now, just to again honor everybody's lives and stomachs, because some of us need to eat, right? So I you know, we talked about this in our planning call, where we knew that we'd sort of be like, and there you go, right? Like, with like, please don't, let's not start a task force and another working group and all that, like, right? Like that's not the goal of tonight's conversation. But I love the way that Ryan kind of talked about it, and I even wrote it down. It was sort of, he says it's examination and dissection, and it doesn't require that we put it back together. Okay, so I meant to start the conversation that way, and kind of, but that's how I'm closing it. So my hope is that that we, you know, collectively we're able to lift up some of these thoughts, these things that I'm sure other folks in the little squares here are also thinking about. And now that you are, you know, seeing how folks are connecting with some of these concepts and ideas and movements, that you will connect with one another. And I believe that Meredith and her team will have a way to do that, so that folks are, you know, can be in community with one another beyond tonight's conversation. But we hope that it was worth your time, that it was fruitful, and it was worth putting your dinner off if you fall into that category. But I really appreciate just the opportunity to listen and to learn and reflect, and and connect. I needed this very much tonight. So thank you to Tia and to Lattice and to Ryan and Stefan and Meredith and the team. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for logging on tonight. So that's it for me. Meredith, you probably got something to take it home.
Not really. I just echo all of that. Thank you. I have nothing else to add to what was a fascinating, inspiring, troubling, wonderful conversation. Thank you all for being so open and honest with us. And just a shout out again to our sort of co-presenters. I get the pleasure of talking, but they're all here and working very hard at the Art Students League, the Clifford Still Museum, and Red Line. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and keep up the good fight. Night, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Love
you.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see your face.